Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DriveThru RPG review, my written and video review series where I take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at DriveThruRPG.com. This video I'll be reviewing the one-shot adventure The Wizard's Egg, designed by Shadows of Pindus for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Review copies have been provided for the purposes of this review. If you enjoy my videos, consider using my affiliate links when making any purchases on DriveThruRPG and the DM's Guild, and you can support me via patreon.com/RogueWatson. Shout out to Platinum patrons Andrew, Brian, Richard, Joe, Will, Tiny Dancer, and Charles, and Gold patrons RPG Papercrafts, Charming Grenade, Pretty Boy and Yuma, Marcos David Vicente Gilberto, Sean aka Cert2B, Adam, Dead Lizard Lounge, Aukshi, and Sam. Thank you all very much for your support. The Wizard's Egg is a heist adventure that takes place in a arcane punk setting called Pindus, which is a giant city. It really reminded me of Ravnica in terms of the level of technology and wizardry and magic colliding together, and it's a huge urban setting with obviously very big class divides between the haves and the have-nots. I was initially kind of turned off by how much world building there is for a one-shot, because when I think of a one-shot adventure, I want something that I can either A, drop in as a self-contained side quest into my campaign, which is most likely, and I imagine most people, is either Forgotten Realms or a home-brewed setting similar to Forgotten Realms, or I want to play something that's a complete one-off. That's just, we're making new characters, we're just going to run through this one session just for funsies because we can't do our main campaign for whatever reason. Those are the two things I'm looking at when I'm looking at doing a one-shot. So the fact that this one-shot takes place in this world that has all of this lore and different levels of technology and everything built in is very surprising and ambitious. But I will say that I very much liked the heist that is crafted here. I think it is very fun. It reminded me a lot of the kind of Shadowrun adventures that I would design, which are, you know, you get your mission from your fixer, you have to go inside and do a thing, and then complications can arise from that, and that's what makes it fun and memorable. And this one has a very cool dungeon design that I liked a lot in terms of giving everybody multiple ways of getting inside this area and different challenges and traps and things they have to overcome once they're inside. And it's a heist because when I think of a heist, it's specifically not an adventure where combat should be the primary way of solving challenges. You want to get through it via stealth and deception, maybe some charisma checks, or, you know, let other characters kind of have a chance to shine, with the caveat that there will be a little bit of combat, but maybe a little bit less towards that. And I would prefer if all dungeons were designed kind of that way in general, but the heist is specifically you are in there to get a MacGuffin item and then get out, or in this case you're in there to actually blow up the MacGuffin items and then get out to this very cool climactic action sequence, which has some cool detailed rules involved. It is designed for Tier 1 play, which is levels 1 through 4, average party of 4 to 6 players, and I am digging it quite a bit. Let's jump in and I can take a closer look at The Wizard's Egg. It is about 30 chapters, 30 pages divided into 4 chapters, only one of which is the actual dungeon crawl itself. The first 2 are basically set up, but you can see here in this introduction how much world building there is for Pindus, which again is this setting that this adventure takes place in, and frankly I don't think you need to know most of this to actually run this adventure, because, you know, MacGuffin, you don't have to explain too much of it, although it is kind of a cool item. Basically these elemental drives, which I think is how these sky ships are powered in Storm King's Thunder also, where it's like a trapped elemental, but apparently that's the means of locomotion in this world. Is they've got these elementals trapped in these devices, which they call E-drives, and that powers skyships and all their stuff. So anyway, a bunch of these were stolen from one company to another, and a fixer hires the player characters to then go in and not even steal these things, but just go in and destroy them. Just make sure nobody else has like the properties to be able to manufacture or research these at all. So very very, very cutthroat corporate maneuvers here, but essentially the players might as well be Shadowrunners because that's essentially what this is set up to be. But there's a lot of information here on the companies and these devices and everything, and the city itself. Again, I'm almost turned off. I appreciate this amount of lore, I really do, but it's very weird to have so much of this for what is a one-shot. I would have really loved if there had been maybe a little bit less of this and more about how to apply this to be more setting agnostic. So how would you create this scenario in the Forgotten Realms, or how would you put it in Greyhawk, or just whatever kind of homebrew setting you have? Like, how would you do it? And the problem is you wouldn't be able to do it very well because it requires a level of technology to exist within your world. Like, this is basically a laboratory of technology that the players are scaling. Now, maybe that could be a very secret special thing, but the players are also, it's a tier 1, so it's very low level players. So it has to be, that level of technology has to be common enough where you would hire just the cheapest special forces characters you could possibly have to employ to go on this mission. So I'm not sure how you would actually be able to do this systematically. So, and that's going to be pretty much one of my few cons of this whole adventure, is just the actual setting seems very difficult to be able to plop this adventure into an existing campaign. Instead, you're probably looking at playing this, which is the latter one I talked about, which is playing it as just a one-off with new characters that are made for this adventure, which in that case, that still makes a lot of work for the DM to have to read up on, okay, how does this world work, and what are the important things I have to know, because we're just jumping into this for 1 4-hour session, which is also asking a lot. So I'm not a fan of that, and I'm not sure what the solution is there, other than trying to come up with a way to change things around to where you could at least put this in other areas. I really do think this could fit in Ravnica somewhere. I'm not totally engrossed in my Ravnica knowledge, but I feel like it's kind of similar in flavor there. But I would have liked to see this had a way to be more lore and setting agnostic versus this Pindus location. Not that Pindus one is bad, it's just this is a lot to learn and figure out for a one-shot adventure. Chapter 1 is just getting the mission. You meet with Hope, which is the fixer. They tell you how much money you're going to get paid, as well as some general notes about what you have to do. And your goal is to break into literally this egg-shaped laboratory structure and then affix these bombs to the drives that were taken, and they will then blow up. And of course, your fixer doesn't tell you that the charges and explosions are going to create way bigger explosion than what the players know, and that will create hopefully a thrilling egress from the titular wizard's egg if they go through with it. And then Chapter 2, they'll be taken by another person, Birdie, on a bunch of hippogriffs to fly into this location, which the whole thing is really cool. I mean, there's a lot of really neat lore about this city, and it's built in this archipelago, and it's all tangled, and there's this one district that's all built from the top down because it's built into a plateau. Like, it's a really cool world, but again, it's a lot of world building for a one-shot adventure. And this one area is, of course, this bourgeois, the high-class, expensive, the gated community area that they have to get in. There's a cool checkpoint where they have to go in. There's this electrified fence, and they have to hand over their papers. And of course, the fixer gives them the papers to get inside. It's got all these cool, check beats that it's making for a heist that I love. That all of this is designed to just get your players inside. And if you've got 1 or 2 jackass players, they're probably going to fuck things up somehow. But hopefully, you can hand wave your way to where they can at least get to the structure itself. And there's even a little bit where they can eat at the nearby restaurant. You can see where it's this is a really cool picture right here. They can eat at a nearby restaurant and actually look at the egg and kind of scope out what they want to do and how they want to tackle it. And then we get a really nice map here, which I'm probably going to stay on this map for a while because it's easier for me to point at different areas than it is to go through the text. But I really, really love these cutaway 3/4 maps views. I do. I love them. But the caveat is they're not useful for virtual tabletop purposes. You can't. I can't put that into Roll20 and then use that. So that's That's a bit of a bummer. I like the design of the map, especially with the three-dimensional. It lets me see, because it's a very uniquely three-dimensional design dungeon, and it does a good job of letting me see exactly how big rooms are and where they are in proportion to another. So I love that I got this map. I would have also liked to have, in addition to this, a top-down map of each room. Would have been very, very helpful to have for actual playing on purposes. Otherwise, if I have to play this in Roll20, I'm having to just make these maps from scratch, and they'll have to be just a bunch of separate rooms, I think. But you can see automatically there are some really neat ways to get into this dungeon. So the very front door is guarded by really what is one of the few combat encounters called this kind of this evil adventurers party, almost Fane's Best, a scout, lizard folk, acolyte, and bandit here. They're just guarding the entrance, and they will straight up kill anybody that tries to get in. So that's the combat approach, basically. You can also come in through the top. There's these vents on the top, and of course there's the classic giant spinning blade players have to get by. And yes, there's a lot of saving throws and things that need to be made. You can, get sliced by the blade. You can fall on top of it. You can take these different ventilation shafts into different rooms, or you can just fall straight down into this bedroom here. Or you can take this bottom rung, which are these two tines just sticking out. It's basically a garbage chute with this ramp leading down. This reminded me a lot of the bottom of Cloud City and Empire Strikes Back, where Luke's just hanging on to, the blades at the bottom. That's kind of what this is, just free fall beneath you that they try to get in this padlocked area. So really cool way. You've automatically got 3 very different ways of getting into this dungeon, all with different skill checks and different strengths of the party. Hopefully they don't take the straight up combat approach, because I think this group makes for a useful party, a useful combat encounter to still be around whenever they're leaving. In case they decide to not blow everything up, then that combat party will then move inside and act as the climactic battle encounter to end the adventure. But if they go through the bottom, there's actually a gray ooze down here, which is really clever, because it's the garbage disposal system for this society. They use a bunch of oozes, which I think that's brilliant. They even have a giant syringe here and a glaive, so it feels so, and I love this because it's kind of like a mundane thing to do with fantastical creatures and objects, which is exactly how I would picture like a modern D&D society would operate. It's just they've used oozes now as trash pickup, and you can picture a worker just in there with a glaive cutting the ooze apart because it splits, and then using a syringe to separate one ooze, put it into a cube, and just move it on. I don't know, that seems really cool, and the players can just kind of discover this and then go up through the garbage way, which is really cool. What else is in here? So on number 2, this is the main room here. They can actually see windows in, which is really neat. I like the fact that you can look in on laboratory rooms before going in the door. Number 2 actually has an animated armor and a magic mouth at the door, which asks a question, and the players can learn the answer to that if they go into the person's bedroom, which they are trying to get to. So there is one NPC in here that's also given a lot of lore and background information, Altusen. And she goes by different aliases. She is a down-and-out noblewoman who is a practicer of arcane arts and kind of a con artist and grifter. But she also works with these e-drives, and the players can either ally themselves with her or attempt to blackmail her or do whatever they want. There's all kinds of different options. But it's her and her lab assistant are working on these 3 e-drives. The lab assistant has died, has cracked open the e-drive, and a bunch of steam methods came out and killed them. And they are face down in this kind of scalding pool of water, so that's just a combat encounter, and that means they don't have to destroy that e-drive, I suppose. 2A has that, as I said, that magic mouth that asks the questions. They can find the answers in 7, or they can just barge in and fight the animated armor in there. And there are 3 levers players can push that open the different doors, with the 3rd lever just closing shut the door, locking it, and venting gas. That is a Tomb of Horrors style trap. I'm not even sure why it's there to begin with, other than kind of just a tricky trap, but yeah, if they pull the blue lever, you're kind of screwed on that one. And then number 4, they will actually find that elven spellcaster woman, and they can deal with her how they want. So there's not a whole lot of combat in here, but I think there's just a nice amount of and again, it's a one-shot, so you're meant to be able to play this in one 4-hour session. You've got all that build-up to begin with. So you've got the meeting with the fixer, you've got the hippogriff thing, you've got the checkpoint outside, so you've got some stuff even before you get to this section. So I don't expect this to be very big, and I think it's just about the right size, so the players can figure out, what the best method is to get in, do the job, and then get out. And if they decide to go ahead with the job, so they attach their little explosive devices to the E-drives, and they set them off, then they will quickly realize they are beeping, beep, 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 and they have to escape from this area. And there's a really, really neat... it's actually in Chapter 4, which is the ending. It's called a skill challenge. There's a whole sidebar here. I don't know if this is originally in the Dungeon Master's Guide or if this is actually built for just this adventure, but I was really impressed with the way this is done. But essentially, it is a series of skill checks, and the players should make 5 successes before making 3 failures in order to succeed. So you're supposed to do a bunch of them. And it just kind of gives an example of, picture that scene of an action movie or story or whatever, where it's an explosive, exciting things happening, but it's not in combat. And D&D doesn't have a good method necessarily of doing that. It's all D&D always revolves around combat. Everything is combat. And even though 5th edition kind of tries to get away from that a little bit. But this does a really good solution to that. Essentially has a bunch of group checks that players have to make. You can either do them as group checks or I guess individual checks. But it does say the party have to accumulate 5 successes before 3 failures. And it just depends on different things you want to throw at them. So you could say part of the internal structure of the egg collapses barring the way. You could make an athletics check or a perception check. What's another good one? The troopers are still outside ready to fight someone. You can make an intimidation check or a persuasion check or an acrobatics check to get past them. So you get to do all these cool, like, you present these quick things that are, doors are slamming shut or, reinforcements are coming in the door. Like, what do you guys do? And then give me the checks for that thing. And you can even have different players do different things to let them show off their skills. So I really think this is a fantastic way of speaking to the strengths of all the different player characters while also keeping things exciting while not necessarily being in combat. Because again, combat is going to slow things down. And especially if you're running a one-shot, you have to be very, very aware of how much just straight up combat are you doing, because that is going to take more than anything else that you're doing in that adventure. So for that reason, I'm very glad that this one is fairly low on combat. In fact, that Fenn's Best area pretty much has the most combat. There's a little bit of those steam methods, and then technically they could break down the door and attack that animated armor. So if your characters are very combat focused, they could still find a lot of combat here. But I like that the ending is actually non-combat related. Now, if they decide to not fix the explosive devices and they work with the that Altison person, then there's another way that they can end, which is this Gruskin interferes. The people that kind of hired you can basically show up and basically say you fucked up and attack, and they'll either send the Fenn's Best in there to attack you, or if you already defeated them, worst case scenario, then just some random people will show up to attack as kind of a climactic battle. But I'm kind of hoping that the whole thing comes down. I would actually want that to happen, because I think that is the way more interesting and cool, exciting ending, is that this entire egg structure is just falling down and the players have to try to get the hell out of there, which is really, really interesting. So I really like that. It's a small, compact, but very interesting area. Obviously, the egg itself lends itself to a really cool 3-dimensional dungeon design. There are multiple entrances, which is really fun. And there's a lot of nice traps and triggers like that. The lever trap in here, the bedroom door is trapped. There's that steam method encounter that unless they jack with the body, they might not even fight the steam methods. There's these vents that go different places. There's a lot of interesting ways of doing this dungeon. You could have I always like dungeons where you can have 2 groups go in and tackle it in completely different ways, which is, I think, a really, really fun and interesting design every single time. I also really enjoyed the appendix section here, because it's got, it says useful tables. They are useful tables, so if you fall in Light Mill, obviously falling is very bad, but different things can happen. There's random locations that players can find. Shared histories, which is, for example, again, doing the latter of what I think of a one-shot, if you were building characters specifically for this adventure, then you want to build them with some kind of connection to each other, which is a really, really cool thing that I would recommend you have players do every single time you build an adventure, is try to create these relationships between, because otherwise how the hell do they know each other? There's always that awkward first session where it's like, how do the players know each other? Why would they be working with each other? Why is this tiefling working with this paladin? Kind of a thing. And so you create these kind of relationships, and this just kind of gives you some cool examples. You owe someone a significant debt, you have something somebody wants, somebody is not, or a secret of somebody else's, just kind of create those cool connective tissues. And the appendix also useful for level scaling. So as written, it's for level 1. It just says level 2, the Altistan might be more likely to attack players when they reach that laboratory section rather than work with them immediately, so maybe there'll be a fight, and she is a pretty high level wizard. And then levels 3 and 4, the actual defenders and basically all of the enemies inside the dungeon will be scaled up a little bit. So now there are 4 steam methods instead of 2. There are 2 sets of animated armor instead of 1. You replace the graves with a gelatinous cube. All that is very useful to have. I'm glad it was here. I was wondering, I was reading the adventure and saying, oh man, it just said tier 1, and there's obviously a big damn difference between level 1 and level 4, just night and day. And I was wondering where the level scaling was, and I got to here, and I was like, okay, that's pretty satisfying. I'm glad that they dealt with that, because that is obviously a big deal to have that difference in there. I think you could run it as a level 1 though, and that would make your players a lot more inclined to do things more smartly, maybe, because they don't have that much power behind them, so they would have to think twice about stepping into a trap and opening doors and all that. So I think that could be pretty fun. But overall, I think it's a thumbs up for me. Let's go over my quick pros and cons for the Wizard's Egg. Pro, it's an interesting heist design with multiple entrances, challenges, and traps. As I mentioned, I like the actual dungeon layout a lot. Pro, it's got multiple appendices with helpful tables, deeper PC relationships, level scaling, and a lexicon. Really, really awesome and helpful appendix section. Pro, excellent skill challenge breakdown for creating an exciting non-combat action climax. Hoping that is the climax that is used. Although it is entirely up to your players whether or not they actually want to set the charges and blow things up, but that makes for a really cool climax and exciting chance for the DM and players to work together to create a really neat escape sequence as they try to get out of this thing that's falling down ready to die. Especially if you roll it as a one-off one-shot, you can totally have just some of the characters not be able to make it out alive. That could also be really interesting. Cons. Setting up the unique arcane punk city of Pindus for a single one-shot is asking a bit much. For my one-shots, I don't know if I want to actually go into this whole big lore and world and things that my players aren't familiar with at all. So I would have liked to have just some kind of examples for putting this in other settings to make it a little more agnostic. And cons, as much as I love that 3D cutout design for a map, it's unfortunately there's no top-down maps for virtual tabletop, so I wouldn't be able to just slide this into something like Roll20 and be able to run it right from there, so that is a bit of a bummer. Final verdict, the Wizard's Egg crafts a memorable mini heist adventure with an interesting ovoid dungeon design. I'm glad I got to use the term ovoid dungeon design for the first time ever in a review. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson, and you can follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel. Thank you.